I just realized that I've been working on Hexagod for a year now, and the funniest thing is that the game originally wanted to be, or I wanted the game to be a 30-day project, which was going to be a break from my full-time game to get over the analysis paralysis. You see, I was working on a mining and crafting game kind of inspired by Noita, plus maybe some like Path of Exile crafting mechanics with currencies and stuff like that, and a mapping system, and it ended up being too big of a game for me, and I got stuck in analysis paralysis. So I came up with the idea to spend basically May and July using 30 working days to try to make a game I could publish on Steam. Now, if you're a subscriber of the Gregorian calendar or love to think about dates and times, or even you're a math savvy person like myself, you'll realize that it is May of 2025, and I started that project in May of 2024, and 30 days has surely passed because it's been about a year since I started working on Hexagod. And I wanted to talk about some of the phases of how I got there, because looking back at the last year, I don't think it was a mistake that the scope creep happened, that the 30 days turned into a year. And in fact, I probably will be working on this game for the next year to come. The game is in early access over on Steam if you want to go and pick up a copy. I am cooking up a new patch that should be live either Monday or Wednesday, or I guess a year from now, because I can turn 30 days into a year like that. But I wanted to go through some of the phases here. And the very first phase was the 30-day project back in May. Now, the core of the idea was to take a Stacklands-inspired project for the GMTK 2022 game jam called All Work and No Dice, in which you basically play Stacklands, but with dice, because the game jam was dice-themed. I really enjoyed that game, and I wanted to move it forward and kind of refine that game into what I think could be a Steam game. So that was the thesis of the 30-day project, and what resulted was a hexagon-based game, because I like hexagons as a Civilization player for many, many years of my life, and I still had these card mechanics where you could sacrifice them to gain more favor. You can't really see in the bottom right corner, but then you open up a shop and you get to open up cards just like in Stacklands. We can't play sticks or fish, but we can spawn in our little meeple, who is going to go ahead and start working this tile over here. We can speed up time and slow down time. This build is from July 1st of 2025. I realized very quickly that this game is not ready to go onto Steam, and quite frankly, there were some parts of it that weren't really fun. I'm not even sure if there was a win condition in the game at this point. So this really was a demo, but still not a demo ready for Steam. So I decided to spend, Okay, this is the first big scope creep moment. Basically, from July to August, getting the game ready for the October Nextfest, and then I would release the demo basically as soon as possible. I got that demo released in, I think it was kind of towards the end of July, and Retromation ended up playing it because he's familiar with me, and it just has his nose to the grindstone. I think Orbital Potato played the demo as well, which is awesome. And maybe because they played it, a publisher saw that I had made this demo, played it, and thought that the game had fun. The game was fun, and that they wanted to publish me. And that's the next big scope creep moment. You see, when the publisher reached out, I was working on the GMTK 2025 Game Jam project. It was that Monday of it. I got the email, and I basically stopped doing the Game Jam at that point, and instead pivoted to considering what this publisher would want. The big thing that they proposed was to move the game from the October Nextfest into the February Nextfest, because that would line up better with their release cadences. And then they wanted to fund basically the 6 months or 5 months of expanded development time to add more to the game and to kind of refine some of the systems and add more replayability, instead of the game being kind of a 2 to 3 hour playthrough cycle, trying to make it more like 8 to 15. And during that time, the deadline for the October Nextfest passed. It was in September 2nd, and I was still talking, kind of negotiating back and forth, having my lawyer look at the contract and review it, and kind of nail down something that I was happy with. And I was happy with the agreement, but one of the big things that happened, and I've talked about this before on the channel, is I got really anxious about having to legally tie myself as a small solo studio who is barely staying afloat. Heck, last month was my first profitable month as a solo studio. I got really anxious about the process of doing that and working with a lawyer and stuff like that. Eventually, I thought, you know what? I want to keep my studio simple. And so I walked away from that agreement. And that was kind of the big other second or third turning point here, turning down the publisher and then deciding, because now I can't be part of the October Nextfest, I'm going to be part of the February Nextfest. And so I had those 5 months on my hands to basically try to make the game as good as possible. Leaving that publishing agreement, I had this idea in my head that the game needed more, which looking back was absolutely not true, but it was something I felt as a novice game developer. Like, this is only my second commercial game, and the publisher thought that this game could, they didn't tell me how or what they thought could be done to make it better. Maybe that probably should have been part of my my conversations with them of like, what do they think I could add to make the game better at that point? I didn't ask those questions. Maybe that's a learning lesson that I could take into the next game, or if I ever do work with the publisher, try to understand more of the value they're going to be adding and where they think this game could go to quote unquote like add more value to the players and more playtime. So I had it in my head that I needed to add more to this game. That ended up looking like trying to add in a combat system. That ended up finally pivoting away from a real-time game to a turn-based game. That ended up removing the combat system, adding in a tech tree, and then at one point removing the tech tree and adding it back in and adding in a roguelike questing system. And all of a sudden, you can see how I was kind of floundering a bit. And then the turn of the year happened. And as, again, you probably like the calendar, you'll realize that the turn of the year is January. And if the Nextfest starts at the end of February, that means I had 2 months to get it done. And this is where the final pivot of the major scope creep occurs, is that I decide to pivot into early access. I spend the last 4 months of this basically kind of messing around and prototyping Hexagod further and further and further. In fact, this whole time, I believe I have been prototyping Hexagod mechanics to really understand and find what I think is going to be really fun about this game. And that has meant being brave of throwing away stuff that simply wasn't fun. Like the combat system, the real turn stuff, the tech tree, even throwing away some of the hunger mechanics and some of the core identities that were driven from the Stacklands inspiration, learning to throw those things away again and again and again. So then the early access pivot basically brings us to where we are today. It was my intention to release Hexagod kind of the month after the March Nextfest into a city builder Steam festival, which I thought would be a fun way to kind of like maybe leverage Steam's algorithms and festivals and stuff like that. And it did have some moderate success, and I don't have enough data to really show or say was that a good plan or not. But it did really clarify that if I wanted to release into that festival, I'd have to go into early access. And then after early access, I spent a lot of time trying to bug fix and adjust kind of the easy wins, the easy quality of life changes and things like that to get the game into a state where it's really playable. And once that settled down, I basically took a step back from Hexagod and thought about what I could do to make this game even better. Joe from Indie Game Clinic played the game and had some really, really empathetic and good design advice for me on trying to really nail down what the vibe of the game is, which is a wild thing to think about and say over the course of a year, but think about what is the fun you want to have and try to make elegant game design decisions. So over the last month, you can see the last time I actually did a hotfix was in April 11th. Over the last month, I have been cooking up a new patch that I'm hoping to get live soon. My plan was today, but we all know I can turn 30 days into a year so quickly. So I look back at this last year not with malice or contempt for myself. I look back and I have empathy for somebody who's growing and learning and making mistakes and figuring out that that's how I learn and grow. I can't read books. YouTube videos only go so far for me to learn. At a certain point, I need to sit down, put the mechanic into the game, see if it feels good as I'm developing it, think about and really sit with the mechanic and think about the pros and cons of it, and does it fit and match that core design pillar. So this last year, although there was a lot of code thrown away, I think at this point probably 50% of my project's code right now is either commented out or doesn't actually run during a given play session. I think I learned a ton. My plan right now is to try to get this patch into a beta branch over on Steam shortly, and I'm going to go live over on Twitch and basically try to speed run finishing up some of these final improvements and fixing the content. So if you want to hang out, come join me over on Twitch. It should be a fun Friday, and if not, I appreciate you watching. I've been Aramis. Game development is hard. Life is harder. I'm not sure which of the two is the hardest, so be gentle with yourself. I've been Aramis. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.